have your kind attention, please, ladies and gentlemen? We're about to begin with our next technical session, which is about the unlocking clean energy demand to achieve net zero. We request the panelist and the moderator of the session to join us. Please put your hands together as I invite the moderator of the session, Ms. Disha Agarwal, onto the stage. Very warm welcome to you, Ms. Disha Agarwal. May I now request the panelist of the session to join us onto the stage. We request Sales Lead APEC Energy Exlemper, Mr. Sunil Kothari, to kindly join us onto the stage. Very warm welcome to you, sir. We also invite Director Engineering Blue Way AI, Mr. Hubert Sugang, to kindly join us onto the stage. We're very privileged to have amongst us the Assistant VP, Renewable Energy Storage and New Initiatives, BSES Rajdhani Power Limited, Shri Naveen Nagpal. Very warm welcome to you, sir. I take this opportunity to also welcome the Vice President, SunSource Energy, Mr. Randeep Bora, to join us onto the stage. Very warm welcome to you, sir. We're also being joined by the Head Business Development, Fourth Partner Energy, Mr. Karan Chadda. Very warm welcome to you, sir. Please join me as I invite Mr. Ashish Tiwari, CEO, Kosher Climate India Private Limited. Very warm welcome to you, sir. And a very warm welcome to Mr. Sharad Kumar, who is the Chief of Power Systems and Energy, Tata Steel. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome our panelists, and before I ask the moderator of the session, Ms. Disha Agarwal, to take over, who is the Senior Program Leader from the Council on Energy, Environment and HTO, just a reiteration that this session has been powered by the Council on Energy, Environment and the Water. The objective of the session would be, with the emphasis on the net zero, this session would discuss new opportunities to increase the use of RE across sectors. We would hear from RE technology providers, financiers, discoms, and representatives from high-value industries like cement and steel. Once again, a very warm welcome to our distinguished panelists. Over to you, Ms. Disha Agarwal.
Hello. Yeah, okay. So, thank you so much, Informa Markets, the Renewable Energy India Expo team, for giving us all this opportunity to be here, to come together today to discuss a very important effort and initiative that India is taking towards net zero, and of course how we plan to move towards it. I am Disha Agarwal, Senior Program Lead with the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, and will be moderating this session today. So just a little bit about me and my organization. So Council on Energy, Environment and Water is one of Asia's leading policy research institutions. We work on impacting sustainable development at scale by using data, integrated analysis, and strategic outreach. And this particular convening here, of course, of all the stakeholders and actors in the RE space, not only in India, but also globally, I think is one of the right platforms to be discussing how India could unlock demand for clean fuels, clean electricity in its journey to net zero transition. So what we'll do is, of course, I mean, I think we're running a little behind schedule. We will, I will like to pose a few questions to our panelists here by introducing them again very briefly in the interest of time. And then we'll, of course, all of us would hope to benefit from all what they have to say. So just a little bit of, again, trying to set the objectives and context for this session for all of you. As you all know, that India has committed to a net zero emissions future by 2070. And already the transitions are underway. So I would see 3 key transition, and of course our panelists can add to that if they feel that there are other big waves, running underneath. Is one, of course, there's power sector transition that was already well underway. We're also looking at mobility transition and, of course, industrial, industry energy transition. All these 3 transitions, of course, are at varying degrees and levels as they have progressed over the last, say, decade or so. Of course, industrial decarbonization and mobility transition is something relatively more nascent but gaining speed. And so to be able to meet these decarbonization goals, of course, Government of India is looking at, for example, 500 gigawatts of non-fossil capacity by 2030. We are also looking at, by 2030, say 30% of our new sales to be electric vehicle-based. I was hearing Mr. Tulsi Tanti before this session, and where he was talking about the green hydrogen trajectory from 6 million tons in 2020 to be reaching 11 million tons by 2030, and sort of further to 29 million tons by 2050. So all of these transitions are already happening. We are talking a lot about supply side capacity deployment, huge targets across segments, utility scale, decentralized renewables. But what we are here for today is an equally important aspect of demand creation. So all this capacity that we want to put in may not, or may be at risk if we are not able to create willing buyers or off-takers for clean electricity and clean fuels. And that's why I think this particular topic deserves much attention and focus. So we have a very esteemed set of panelists here today with us who belong to various demand centers for clean fuels today in the country, whether it is commercial and industrial consumers, whether it is the new demand centers, which includes, for example, mobility, or whether it is sort of like market innovations, which will unlock a lot of huge, massive organic demand for renewables. So here is that perfect mix of people who can speak to these matters. So what I'll do is I'll quickly, again, in the interest of time, I would like to start with a couple of our panelists, of course, who are in the business of supplying renewable energy or renewable power to CNI consumers, commercial and industrial consumers. So first and foremost, of course, Mr. Karan Chadha and Mr. Randeep Bora. I think two of you here will be able to speak to some of the developments that you have seen recently in the corporate procurement relating to renewable energy, as well as some of the recent developments and, of course, the barriers and preferences, the evolution in preferences that you see across the different CNI segments. So maybe I can start with you, Karan, and then maybe move to Randeep. I'll just quickly introduce you both. Just in the interest of time, I'll keep it very brief. So, yeah. So Karan is the business development head for Fourth Partner Energy. He's currently the team, heading the team, and is primarily responsible for policy advocacy and ensuring the company meets its expansion and execution targets. He has over 18 years of cross-functional experience in power and renewables. So welcome, Karan, to this session. Very happy to have you. First and foremost, I would like to start with you in just talking about a little bit about the recent developments that you've seen on the markets front. There have been new avenues, new trading platforms that we've seen, the products that are now there in the exchanges. And of course, some regulatory changes on the positive side is what we feel in terms of the green open access rules that have come in. What promise do you think they hold, and do you see demand being invigorated because of these developments happening?
Thank you, Disha. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here. Good evening, everyone. So specifically on the question of about demand creation for green energy, I think there are a couple of things just even today, if you look at the total electricity market in India, roughly 50% of the total electricity consumption happens in what is called as the CNI segment, or the commercial and industrial segment. So it's anyway a very large portion of the total electricity consumption that you have in India, right? So there's a very latent demand that comes from there. Secondly, if you would see, especially in the last couple of years, what we've seen post-COVID, there has been a significant thrust by the government of India in terms of creating manufacturing competitiveness. And one of the fundamental aspects of creating manufacturing competitiveness is the cost of electricity. So that's another big tailwind, that this sector has seen. And the third one, which is more specific to renewable energy, is that any manufacturer today or any private entity which is either a consumer-facing brand, which is catering to, a significantly younger population, which is more environment conscious, or is export-oriented, and hence their customers are demanding, a low carbon footprint. There is, within these three factors, there is enough and more capability within the sector to offtake green energy. And, what we have seen in our business is for the last, 3 to 4 years is there has never been a challenge as much in terms of saying that, do customers really want this or not? I think that question has been answered much long before. And where the need for it is very apparent, clear, I don't have to go to customers and sell that, you should use green energy and not the, conventional source of energy. I think with green energy penetration actually increasing, it's historically always been a supply side issue. And when I say supply side, it has been more about, do you have the right set of policies and government frameworks which enable faster implementation? And secondly, on the supply of the actual equipment to install, etc. So talking about the first one on the regulatory side, historically there was just one mode, right? Like you go to a customer, he'll say, well, saab aapko bijli chahiye, apna, you put up your own plant, you can actually utilize the energy. Then there were different models that actually came in, from third-party procurement to group captive structures as per the Electricity Act. And one of the things that the creation of an exchange does, and this is something that is a phenomenon that has been seen globally, it actually deepens the market. It makes price discovery easier. It allows for another avenue for developers like us to sell energy. And for customers which don't have stable demand, they can actually access green energy instead of getting into 15, 20-year contracts. So I think both in terms of creation of exchanges, which is a marketplace which enables greater avenues for consumption. And secondly, the central government, and I think this has been a theme right from, I guess the last 10 years or so, is that they've been talking about, further growth targets in terms of deployment of renewable energy. And they do also realize that, one of the legs of, meeting those targets that we have set is also the consumption of this green energy by corporates, commercial and industrial consumers, both in terms of open access as well as in terms of, rooftop power. So that is certainly there. And we look, in our industry, we always say there will always be a tussle, right? Because the DISCOM will always feel that you are taking away their most profitable customers. But that's, that's just the nature of the beast. So, but overall, I've actually seen that, things will keep moving forward, sometimes slowly in certain states, sometimes faster in other states. But I think it's like, you can't stop an idea whose time has come. So I would actually see that for the next 3 to 5 years at least, the majority growth in terms of renewable energy will be coming in terms of selling to, corporate consumers. And this will also lead to evolution of new models. Financiers will get comfortable with, new models of sale. And I think that's what will actually drive the growth.
Thank you, Karan. That's quite helpful. I think we have a DISCOM also, with us. Naveen is here representing part of the Delhi DISCOM. So we'll hear from him in a bit. But before that, we'll move to Randeep. So welcome, Randeep. And Randeep is Vice President at SunSource Energy, which is one of the leading companies today supplying to their the corporate clients, again meeting their renewable energy needs and demands. He has over 13 years of experience in the sector, and he leads new business and tendering division, which includes energy storage, floating solar, and all government PSU projects. So welcome, Randeep. Maybe we can request you to little bit deep dive on where do you see bulk of the demand coming from, in terms of which states do you think will form majority of the open access demand, or buyers from those states, or from which of the CNI segments do you see bulk of this demand coming from? And in the current context, like Karan was also mentioning, that there is greater confidence and comfort, of course, even with some of these newer market products that are available, or companies like yours resorting to exchange-based products, or even some of these new technologies like storage to be able to provide, say, more reliable or round-the-clock power. So do you think there is anything on the financing side which you think is required so that they are able to, you're able to adopt some of these newer innovations that are there? So these two aspects, if you can speak to. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Diksha. Good afternoon, everyone. So to start with a little bit deep dive, what are the options for the typical CNI consumer? So when we all started in 2010, the market started, rooftop itself was a very new concept, and 10 kilowatt was a decent size. So then it moved to 100, and then 1 megawatt, and then we are talking of 10 megawatt type of rooftop projects at captive locations. And now we have sets of customers who are kind of repeat customers who have now experimented with solar at a broader level. They understand, and they know that there is no rocket science in it. But then now they after seeing the benefits of it, experimented, all the large, I would say, CNI players who are in the, say, top 200 companies of India have done some rooftop capacity in some capacity across the manufacturing units. So now they want to move ahead, and they have set their own goals. Most of the MNCs, as well as the Indian large corporates, have set targets of, say, by 2030 or 2050, they have to go to net zero, or at least 50 to 70% of their consumption should come from renewables. And today, what are the kind of options? One is definitely rooftop or captive project. Beyond that, we have all experienced the boom of open access through the Karnataka policy in 2018, which was one of its kind, and the benefits a lot of people reaped. Beyond that, and now in some of the states, obviously, since RTC is one of the need to go to up to, say, 60 to 70% renewables. And beyond that, you will have VPPAs and virtual PPAs and various other IREC mechanisms to adapt to go to 100%, because reaching 100% is not easy, but definitely possible. Maybe not definitely today. There are some regulatory challenges that we see today, but the market is evolving fast, and because there is a demand, you cannot stop the demand. No matter how, whatever hindrances are there at the state level, I think those will be steamrolled just because the need is so urgent, and we all understand how climate change is affecting. We are having rains in October, so these are all effects which we can see. So coming back to the point, like which are the states today? Broadly, most of the developers are focusing on the states where regulations are long. We have a vision of, say, 10, 15 years of exemptions on the charges. For example, UP and Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. These are the few states, and some of the other states are also like coming up. There are two aspects. One is the regulation, and other is the demand. Demand in the sense that which all are the industrialized states. These are the typical industrialized states where you see most of the demand coming from, and also. Gujarat per se is a power surplus state, but today solar pure open access cannot happen, but wind solar hybrid has taken a major role in that state, and then a lot of people have invested into it. But wind has typically seen a lot of challenges, and wind is specific to very few states. So ISTS is another way of transmitting power through various from one state to another state. There will be hindrances. For example, like in hydro, if you are putting up a hydro plant, somebody told me that you have to pay, give some free power to that state. Rajasthan, a couple of days back, came up with a regulation that 10% of the, if you are selling the power through ISTS, has to be given free of cost to the state discom. So these all will add up to the cost, but at the end, the power will be still cheaper than the grid electricity, which will be exponentially growing. As we all know, the grid power has been, demand has been typically increasing by 7% or so over the last 10 years, but last 2 years there has been a dip. But we are sure that the demand will keep on increasing. And with the demand increasing, we have recently heard about Amazon coming out with the huge deal closing in India. So all these data centers and the high power consumers, they will find a way to, because they have global targets. They have short-term targets like 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. So these demand centers will drive and create innovations in the technology side of it, as well as in the financial and the regulatory side of it. There are some of the regulatory challenges in terms of, as you call the interstate transactions and the VPPAs, for example. There has to be some changes on the jurisdiction part on vis-a-vis CRCs and CRC and the SEBI. Some notification has to be changed to give more clarity on it. So, but then as I see it, because the consumption of power is increasing so much, and India always has been a growing market, these will drive newer companies and newer entities to dive into other technologies and like adapt to the newer ways of going green, which are like VPPs are very common in US and other markets. So those things will get adopted in India in due course, whether you like it or not, or discoms like it or not. They need to change, and they'll have to adapt to the need of the hour and the need of the consumers to go green. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Randeep. I think that was also quite insightful. We've seen quite varying level of regulatory actions across states, and that's something that, of course, slows down the kind of transition that the industry sector is poised to look at. But of course, I think with these certain developments that are happening, we are more hopeful that some of these disparities might end in time to come. I think this is a perfect segue. I think from Karan and Randeep, we'd like to move to Mr. Sharad Kumar, and then of course maybe I'll come to you, Naveen, because since we are talking about the commercial and industrial sector, and we have Mr. Kumar with us who represents Tata Steel. He's Chief of Power Systems and Energy there. And steel sector being, of course, one of the most energy intensive sectors, and because of that, also one of the sectors which will have a gigantic task when it thinks about moving from the conventional sources to cleaner sources of fuel. So welcome, Mr. Kumar. It's our pleasure to have you here. Mr. Kumar has about 36 years of experience being in Tata Steel in various roles, such as engineering and projects, maintenance, production planning, marketing, sales, power distribution, and city power management, generation, fuel management, etc. Welcome, sir. What we'd like to know from you is that, of course, we know that steel units across the country and, of course, across the globe will be dependent primarily on fossil fuels. So internally, in your organization, what kind of risks are you associating with the current energy dependence on fossil fuels that you have? And how have those risks sort of evolved over time? Of course, we know that, globally, geopolitically, we are seeing certain tensions around the world, which are constraining supply chains, risking, price volatility for fossil fuels. So how are you viewing those risks in association with your operations? And are the current clean energy options or procurement methods
adequate to meet or to mitigate some of those risks? Do you see any changes that you would like to see?
Thank you. Thank you, Disha. Good evening to everyone. So the question which Disha has framed is that what are the risks that a steel industry typically looks at from its energy requirement perspective? So to answer that question, I would like to just put in perspective the typical characteristics of the steel industry. Now, in the steel industry, it's a very capital-intensive industry to begin with. So, I mean, you spend a huge amount of capital to set up capacities. I'm talking about the integrated steel plants and the large steel industry companies. So you spend a lot of capital, and typically you require maybe 15 to 20 years to recover the investment that you've made into the steel industry. Now, having said that, in the steel industry, in the conventional route that has been in existence for, I don't know, for last maybe 100 years, it's the blast furnace and basic oxygen furnace route, which typically converts the virgin iron ore into finished steel of the required quality. Now, this particular route is such that the total energy requirement, out of the total energy requirement, almost 85% has to come from coal and coke. Now, that's a very dangerous situation to be in today, because as you know, because of the fact that steel industry uses such a high amount of carbon fuels for converting the ore into finished steel, the amount of CO2 that it emits is huge. So on an average, if you look at Indian context, it is somewhere around 2.5 to 3 tons of carbon dioxide which gets emitted for every ton of steel that we make. So we make more carbon dioxide than steel. That's one way of putting it, which is very scary in today's context. Other countries where, you know, there are some other technologies or who, you know, have natural gas availability, or who have availability of scrap for recycling, there the emissions are somewhat lower, but it is still in the range of around 1.8 tons per ton of steel. So 1.8 tons of carbon dioxide gets emitted even there. And as we have seen in other countries, especially in Europe, there are carbon taxes. So the greatest risk that the steel industry sees is that if you keep emitting this kind of carbon dioxide, the government will definitely come down and you will have to pay huge amounts of taxes, and your products are going to become that much more expensive and perhaps unaffordable, and maybe other materials could become more competitive. So that's a risk that I see, especially because the fact that in the last 100 years there has not been much of development on the technological front of, you know, converting iron ore into steel. So most of the technologies that are there, they use either coal or they use natural gas. These are the two technologies. And the third one, which uses electricity, basically converts not ore, but it converts scrap into finished steel once again. That's a recycling basically. And that is typically more prevalent in economies where there is a lot of scrap which gets generated because of, you know, recycling of the cars and other automotives and things like that, which is not a case in India. So in India, we don't have natural gas. In India, we don't have enough scrap. So the only viable option in India is to use the blast furnace route. Now, the capacity that we have for steel making in India is close to about 110, 120 million ton as of now. But it is projected that India needs roughly 200 to 250 million tons in the next 10 years. So basically, we have to double the capacity. And as I have said, the cost of capacity addition is pretty huge. I mean, it's a very capital-intensive thing. So when you don't have, you know, the line of sight of how the technology is going to emerge, which will help you in, you know, taking a route which is less carbon-intensive, and finally being a net zero steel making route. We don't have that line of sight as of now. So, and in this context, if we have to support the growth requirement in the country, and if we have to make that steel, so the only option that is available is to continue with the current and make improvements in that. So yes, there are a lot of initiatives which the companies are taking to cut down on the CO2 emissions. So one is the coal and coke side, the other is of course the electricity, which forms maybe 5 to 10% of the energy requirement of a steel company. There is a lot of action where practically we've decided that we are going to, completely graduate into clean energy only. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is how do we emit less CO2 in the blast furnace route, which is by injecting some kind of natural gas and things like that. So some natural gas, even though it is scarce in India, we would still want to use to the extent that is available and reduce the CO2 footprint of the steel that is getting made. And of course, we are also setting up scrap-based EAFs, which will help us in reducing the CO2 by using clean electricity to convert scrap into finished steel. But as I said, that is also a constraint with respect to the availability of scrap. So these are the challenges that we have. But simultaneously, I will also say that there is a lot of work which is happening in terms of finding viable solutions for making completely green steel. So there is some work which has happened in Europe. In fact, Tata Steel Europe is doing pioneering work in that area also, and we hope to, benefit from that in India too. So use of hydrogen is one such area, and it is certainly, it has been found to be viable, not viable I would say, but it is technically it is feasible, and at smaller scale it has already been tested and it has produced, I would say, favorable results. We have to now scale it up and see how it can be made at a commercially viable scale. So that work is very important. But having said that, there is a huge implication in terms of how you will get that hydrogen, because it has to be green hydrogen. And as we all know, the availability of green hydrogen in the country is also something which has to develop very fast. Typically, the earlier route used to consume hardly, I would say, 60, 70 megawatt of electricity in making the steel. But if we want to move to green hydrogen-based steel making, then the requirement of energy would be almost 10 to 15 times what it is today. The implication of that is that you will need to set up almost, for example, I was saying that there is a requirement of building 100 million tons of additional capacity in the next 10 years. So for 100 million tons, it is expected that if we want to make this through the green hydrogen route, it will require more than 300 gigawatts of renewable energy. So India has a target of going to 500 gigawatt, and steel industry alone will require close to 300 gigawatt to convert this energy into green hydrogen, if we want to really make steel out of that. So this is a big challenge, and I think there is a lot of work which needs to happen on the green hydrogen front to enable the steel industry. And of course, here there is a lot of work which has to be done both by the steel makers, by the renewable energy players, and by the government, which will facilitate this transition from coal and coke into clean steel. So that's my response. I don't know whether that has been
Thank you.
able to address your question adequately or not.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. I think you emphasized on 3 routes from VSES Rajdhani. One, the leading Delhi Discoms, of course, and he's been working with the SES Rajdhani towards integration of renewables into the distribution grid, and also pilot projects for deployment of battery energy storage systems and initiatives towards grid modernization and digitalization. So welcome, Naveen. Really glad to have you here. I think from the CNI consumer, we moved to the distribution sector. Again, distribution companies being, of course, bulk buyers of renewables today in the country. And they will continue to be the bulk buyers even going forward. And I think the sector does rely on the distribution company to buy more renewable power for the entire sector to be, attractive, and investors also finding some, viable ground if distribution companies become more healthier in their situation. We know that in India, of course, not Delhi discoms, of course, are an exception, but many discoms are financially stressed because of various reasons on the retail tariff side, the cross subsidy structures that the discom have to follow. But so in that context, what do you think, like how the discoms in the current framework, of course, can create some space or some financial room such that they are able to find opportunities to buy more renewable power? Can they, save on certain costs? Can they look at their existing power portfolios to create that kind of, financial rooms so that they are able to absorb more renewable energy, whether it is buying more utility scale or, absorbing the surpluses that are getting generated from decentralized renewable energy plants? So I think no one better than you can answer, because Delhi discoms have been taking a lot of initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Disha. The query, if I understood correctly, if you see the traditional way to procure power by a discom is through a bilateral contract, long-term bilateral contract between developer and discom. And generally those bilateral contracts would have very limited scope to exit. Even if I would say the project has completed their useful life, even then it is very difficult to exit those contracts because those projects get under RNM and they extend their useful life. So if we need to kind of support the decarbonization target which government has agreed upon, or the kind of net zero targets by 2070 which we are talking of, if those we have to meet, so of course discoms need to optimize their power portfolio with a mix of kind of thermal generation which can be act as a base load, but RE generation we have to have in our portfolio in terms of decarbonization as well as in terms of meeting our RPO targets. And if you see the RPO trajectory which MOP has notified just 2 months back, it has very steep RPO targets. Nearly 43 to 44% of energy should have to be bought from renewable sources. So if that is the kind of target we have, so we should get some sort of leverage to exit from the old PPAs also, so that we can have new kind of arrangements with the new RE developers to have RE energy into our portfolio. Along with that, we have markets, very developed markets now in India, like we have DAM, we have RTM markets, we have GTAM. So there has to be an optimized portfolio among long-term PPAs with thermal as base load. Then we should have RE tie-ups. And then we have some sort of, I would say, through market arrangements to meet any sort of eventuality in terms of meeting our schedule. And the one point I would like to add here, when we talk about RE integration into our power portfolio, we know RE is inherently variable and intermittent in nature. So unless we have advanced level forecasting techniques incorporated into our system to assess the kind of demand projection as well as supply side variation, unless those kind of forecasting techniques are available, it would be very difficult to maintain the kind of schedules which we give to load dispatch centers 1 day in advance. So basically, I would like to add here, like if we need to maintain our schedules within the specified limits as per the DSM regulations in order to maintain the frequency, so we have to have some sort of forecasting along with the kind of some balancing power resources. So that could be in terms of battery energy storage, that could be in terms of pumped hydro, but some sort of balancing power reserve has to be there in the portfolio. So if we say the kind of portfolio which DISCOMs are going to have in coming times, so it would be kind of mix of thermal plus RE plus market plus energy storage. Because without energy storage, we cannot target to meet, or we cannot meet the targets set by the governments towards net zero. That is my take.
Okay, thank you. I think you raise a very important point on revisiting contracts with some of the old plants. Notwithstanding that some of those plants will be required in times of scarcity or when you have to meet peak demand, but probably we could look at certain alternative market structures or some kind of capacity markets, and of course we are talking about ancillary services markets where those plants could operate instead of being tied up in them for long. 25-year PPA is already gone, and power plant operators thinking to extend beyond the life as well. So that's something I think at CW we also did a research study where we found out that between that 18-month period of between April 2019 to November 2020, that's when the PP ended, had the Delhi Discoms not procured from, this plant, Dadri 1, they would have saved around more than 1,050 crores or between 1,100 crores, 1,050 to 1,100 crores, just on account of fixed cost savings. So that much amount could have been freed up to buy more renewable power, creating more demand for renewable power. So thank you for bringing up that point. I think we move to Mr. Ashish Tiwari now. Welcome, Mr. Tiwari. I think we'll bring you in for a very important discussion on carbon markets that has been going on since the Energy Conservation Act was passed recently. I'll just briefly introduce you. So Mr. Tiwari is an expert in renewable energy project development with a demonstrated history of working on Indian and international energy projects for over 2 decades. And he has held several leadership positions across Asia and has delivered over 2 gigawatts of project across India, Thailand, and Indonesia. Welcome, Mr. Tiwari. So like I said, carbon markets is something which has been a very hot discussion topic all across social media and people meeting each other. So what do you think would be the most appropriate carbon market design or any kind of greenhouse gas mitigation instrument that India must adopt, given of course it has committed to 2070 net zero, but it has also to meet its development priorities. So there are of course some other instruments that are adopted. EU ETS scheme is one example that has been discussed quite a bit. We also talk about carbon taxes. So your view on what would be the most appropriate given the Indian context?
Hi, good afternoon. So as of now, only 2 options are available for carbon credits. One is compulsory market, that is CDM. However, that CDM, it's not there since 2020, and we are quite hopeful that from 2023, another mechanism will be come from UNFCCC. And second is voluntary market. So in voluntary market, as of now, that market leaders are VCC and Gold Standard, and recently this GCC, this Qatar-based board, they also come up, and now most of the projects commissioned after 2016, they are registered under the GCC mechanism. So if we see the price-wise, so just before the Ukraine-Russia war, the price of Gold Standard was about $9. VCC was between 6 to 7, and then GCC, still that we are waiting for the first transaction to happen, but people are saying that it will be around $5. So if we see that $8 or $9, so in terms of tariff in India, it comes out to be around 40 paisa. So it's a huge money. So I have just two requests from the industry and for the policy makers. First thing is that I had a discussion with SECI and MNRE, and they principally agreed to my suggestion that whatever be the carbon credits, that revenue must be owned by the generator, not by the discoms or any other body. The reason being is, for example, the two gentlemen, they were talking about the C&I segment. So in C&I segment, it is very easy to prove that return on investment is less than 16% if a generator is selling the electricity to a company. However, if a commercial customer or a the industrial customer who is paying that electricity charges as 7 rupees or 8 rupees, if he is getting in 3 rupees or 4 rupees, so it's a just that 100% that he is saving around, or 50% he is saving. So they may not get the carbon credit benefits. So as of now, that policy is not really very clear, and there are some issues, and but maybe in coming years there will be issues. So in the policy, that if the carbon credits will be owned by the generators, so it will be better for everybody. However, that it can be shared with the end user or the customer. And one more question always comes, that there is a RPO, and for the discom. So how a generator can claim the carbon credits? So since last 15 years, if we see that around, I think 10, 12 years back, that when I signed one of the PPA with the GUVNL Gujarat, so Gujarat has started very first, and they were pioneer in sharing of the carbon credit revenue. So in their PPA, it is sharing from 10% to 50% of the carbon credits. So with that PPA, that document has been made, the DOE has approved, they verified it, and the project got the host country approval from MOEF, then it submitted to the UNFCCC, they also approved it. And so if we see in practical, that everything is allowed since last maybe more than 10 years. But morally, if we are discussing, we are talking, that is a double computation something. So this question will always be there. And my, that second request to all of you is, that the government of India is preparing the policy for carbon credits in India. So earlier, the PAT is still there. I think still in the East industry, people know very well, and then RPO is there. So if any discom is not achieving RPO, that they can purchase the RECs. But if we see that REC market in India, so still a lot of RECs are banked maybe for years, and then they are no takers. In one of the session, I heard that a lot of discoms, they are not paying for the electricity they are buying for more than a year or so. So it becomes difficult for them to purchase the RECs, whether they have to pay the electricity they are purchasing, or they have to purchase the RECs. So the financial health of the government on discoms in India is also very critical. So that RPO compliance and the REC market, domestic REC market, will always be a question. So in coming years, if that any kind of compulsion comes, so it has to come to the industry and the generator. And second thing, that India has a very big market for renewable and as well as the NBS. For example, if you see that wind sector, so India is is ranking since from 3rd to 5th rank in last 15 years. Same is with solar also. So we are the market leader in the world, and if we see in the carbon market or in the wind or solar, anywhere in the world, you will find Indians. So why not that India also that have their own registry for the voluntary market? Because if we see that the difference of rate between the voluntary market and the CDM is just double. So if India will have their own registry, so and then government will also allow the voluntary market to run from India, and the project from the India has to register there, and they can trade globally, and the global players can also come to India. So then India will become I think, a leader in carbon trading also.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tiwari. I think this is something that all the stakeholders, I think we need to deliberate on what pathway India should adopt. So I think what I'll do is, because we just have some time pressure here from the organizers, I'll bring in our analytics people who are here. So Mr. Hubert Sugang and Mr. Sunil Kothari. Mr. Hubert is Director Engineering at Blue Wave AI. And he's passionate about applying technology in innovative ways to contribute to sustainable and prosperous future driven through economics. Of course, he has a strong career, 20-year-long career in critical industries ranging from utilities, mobile carriers, enterprises, fleets. And we have Mr. Sunil Kothari also with us. He's the sales lead Asia Pacific at Energy Exemplar. He's responsible for business growth of Energy Exemplar business in South Asia region, especially the Indian subcontinent. And his role is to work closely with power, utility and renewable and gas companies, government regulators to demonstrate energy optimization modeling. Of course, I've also been reading a lot of worldwide reports, which come based on Plexus, the tool. And I've also had the opportunity to use some of these tools in my work. So welcome to both of you. One question each to both of you, and I'd humbly request if you could take 2 minutes each, and then we'll sort of wrap it up, is to Hubert. I know your organization has been looking at the smart real-time management of various energy sources, supply side, demand side. So if you could let us know from examples globally as well as in India, if how we can sort of see this mobility sector coupled with RE. So mobility, of course, a decentralized end use and decentralized renewable energy applications that we also need to scale up. How the two can sort of be, going together, and what kind of on-ground studies or support that might be required to demonstrate, say, integration of, say, rooftop solar PV with EV chargers, and how that can be, sort of like optimized such that we are able to meet the mobility needs of the consumers in a competitive, cost-effective manner. So over to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. 2 minutes, okay. So I'll keep it brief. So let's start with EVs, right? The conventional way of dealing with EVs is people come home, buses go back to the depot, and it causes an evening peak, quite a high peak because electric vehicle charging is a big draw. And rooftop solar, or solar in general, is going to create a very deep valley in the middle of the day around noon. And in the industry, we call this the duck curve. And that duck curve is a problem because the evening peak caused by EV is going to be a larger capacity that the grid may not be able to host. And then the rooftop solar causing a deep valley at noon is going to create voltage surge problems on the receiving feeders. So how do you make these two cooperate? It's not so much a PV powering solar challenge as it is about serious grid operation issues. And the means you have of dealing with that are direct and indirect means. So what could a direct means be? A direct means would be convincing, making incentives for EV owners to, or bus operators to charge during the day, during PV. This could mean charging at work instead of charging at home, or en route charging by bus fleets instead. And indirect means, of course, means using storage technologies to be able to time shift, shave the peaks in the evening, and fill the valleys in the middle of the day. So that's the nutshell. And now let me address the simulation side of things, because that's quite exciting as well. So the simulations, they've mostly been simulations these days. There's lots of papers out there talking about how you can have distributed energy resources be pooled together to be able to manage all this time-shifting behavior. And a case study would be, relatively recently in the news, Tesla is fortunate to have a totally vertically integrated system. And there was a grid emergency back in June, and they were able to do a mini pilot where they were able to effectively create something like a virtual power plant based on power walls across hundreds of homes, and able to pump in and support the grid a lot. So, that would be the pilot example for why this whole strategy works, for being able to have distributed energy resources to be able to support the grid, whether or not that's EV at night or whether or not it's about load shifting. The great news is that current technology can do this from the unidirectional path, which is what our current infrastructure is. That's more about a challenge of being able to have communication path to a whole bunch of chargers, being able to have software systems that can handle the complexity with that many chargers. And into the future, bidirectional support would be very interesting. The concepts around vehicle to grid, even more complexity, more things to control. But of course, that requires innovation and change to the current infrastructure around battery technology and the challenges of technology of having vehicle to grid. So hopefully I left you enough time here.
Hello. Thank you, Hubert. Thank you, Disha, for giving me the opportunity. I think 2 minutes is too short to explain the optimization, but in a nutshell, what I want to say here, like my fellow colleagues sitting, like somebody from developer side, somebody from CNI side, someone from the distribution side, and where the optimization comes, I think each and every stakeholders is looking into in this current scenario and the future scenario when you don't know what's going to happen. You have to have multiple scenario when you are taking the future decision. And where this optimization modeling and simulation works, like it can help you to emulate your real life situation. Like you can't predict future, but you can forecast future, how closely you will be the future so that you can make money and everybody here to run the business. So where the Plexos help, like it's quite popular in the western part of the world, and we are getting a lot of success when you do the scenario modeling. And when we especially talk about the net zero and the renewables comes into the picture, there is so much uncertainty comes into the picture when you talk about the variable energy sources. The tool like Plexos or some other modeling tools has capability to do the sub-hourly modeling and taking care of all the constraint and uncertainty and run the various scenarios while taking into your assumptions, limitations, and constraint of the business. You can see where the future predicted. On the distribution side, that as Naveen said, that there is some mandate as a company, they have to follow the renewables, and there is some mandate from the governments they need to generate and distribute that much renewable energy. But is the grid is capable of handling that kind of renewables? Are there any congestions in my grid? Okay, I can generate renewables, my grid is not supporting. How can you see and foresee those kind of challenges? So when you have this kind of software automations, so that tool really help you and try to close you to the real life situation, and you can take your decisions. And especially when this hybrid thing comes at now, we are going into the RTC model and the hybrid model. So how can you optimally, on the minimum cost basis, how can you describe how much I need to invest in solar, how much will be the best capacity of wind and battery storage? How can I optimize my battery, when to charge, when to discharge, on the minute level basis and up to the seconds level basis, like Plexos is the only tool which can do that kind of modeling. So this will definitely help the people sitting on the desk on all business means. That's what I want to say, and we are doing a lot of things. We are quite serious on the Indian market, and being an Indian, I wanted to have that. We should have integrated unified model in Plexos where like transmission companies, utilities companies, generation, everybody seeing the single model and have a holistic approach of the complete industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kothari. I think with that, we approach the end of the session. We definitely could have gone a little longer, but there is a time constraint, I think. So with just the last words that I think we all over here who all are sitting over here on the stage and off the stage, I think we'll all hope that the technology, the finance, and the markets, they all come together so that we are able to move faster towards our net zero ambition. So with that, I'll just thank all the panelists here for your time, for your valuable input, and I think it'll take us, for sure, we are moving forward in the right direction. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you, Informa
Disha.
Markets. Thank you, Amit.
Thank you so much, moderator of the session from Council on Energy, Environment and Water. Thank you for wonderfully conducting and concluding the session. Yes, if we had more time, we could have had much more discussion. We'll keep that in mind. Thank you. On behalf of Informa Market.